studio. Hello and many thanks for joining us on the program People, Politics and Power. I am Imonia Marere. When you recorded on the last edition of this program, we focused on the worsening insecurity plaguing the country. From the north to the south, the story is the same, but that is with reference to physical security. Today we delve into another pressing security crisis that affects millions across the country: the escalating food insecurity in Nigeria. The latest Cadre Harmonies report, conducted in collaboration with the Nigerian government and international partners, reveals a concerning projection. It says approximately 30.6 million Nigerians across 26 states and the Federal Capital Territory are expected to face acute food and nutrition insecurity during the upcoming lean season, that is from June to August 2025. The report highlights that the number of people experiencing emergency levels of food insecurity is projected to rise from 680,000 between March and May 2025 to 1.2 million from June to August, a 43% increase. The northwestern states of Zamfara, Sokoto, and Katsina will be among the most affected, followed by the northeastern states of Borno and Yobe. Other notable hunger hotspots identified in the report include Benue, Kwara, Kaduna, Taraba, and Cross River states. This is no doubt an alarming situation. Moreover, vulnerable groups such as children and pregnant or breastfeeding women are at heightened risk. Approximately 5.4 million children and nearly 800,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women are at risk of acute malnutrition, with an estimated 1.8 million children potentially facing severe acute malnutrition. Both the World Food Programme and UNICEF estimate the figures of people and children under 5 experiencing acute or severe food poverty to be as high as 11 million each. Now, on the program today, we will explore the underlying causes of this crisis, its far-reaching implications, and the urgent actions required to mitigate its impact. We have experts in the studio to give us first-hand accounts and shed light on the path forward to ensure food security for all Nigerians. We shall also be looking, or indeed examining, the act that was passed into law, in 2023, and that act was actually an amendment to the 1999 Nigerian Constitution. It's called the Food Act 2023, and we shall be looking at the responsibility that that act imposes on government and critical stakeholders in the country. These are the issues we'll be looking at on the program today. We'll go on a short break, and when we return, we'll get to meet our guest analysts who are already seated in the studio.
Of our dream, the Nigeria we need is the united, indissoluble, and cohesive Nigeria, which guarantees equity, fairness, justice, and prosperity for its citizens. That is our focus on People, Politics, and Power. It is fresh, insightful, impactful. It's a must-watch. People, Politics, and Power on AIT.
Thank you so much for staying with us, and let's get to meet our guest analysts. First, on my right is Mr. John McKenna, Mr. McKenna is a country director, Oxfam. Thank you so much for joining us.
Most welcome.
Right. We're also joined by Barrister Yahya Dan Asabe Dangana, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. He's not just a lawyer. He, as a principal partner at Law Place Chambers, he is also a farmer. Thank you so much, Mr. Dangana, for joining us.
Our esteemed viewers, it's my pleasure being with you and having been joined in the studio.
Welcome.
Yes, sir.
All right, so Mr. McKenna, let's begin by looking at that report. Indeed, after reading through that report, it looks very depressing that a country as big and as blessed as Nigeria would be going through such a very, very harrowing experience, unable to feed 30.6 million Nigerians.
It is indeed unfortunate development, but perhaps it could also be a wake-up call for Nigeria in terms of what have we missed out for us to be where we are, for us to be 30.6 million of our citizens not being able to feed for themselves. I think that's something that needs to be looked into. I would look at it from perhaps a short to long-term intervention in terms of what needs to be done, because as I said, it's a wake-up call. When you look at the numbers, are indeed kind of threatening. And when you think about the economy of the country, and you think about the policies that the country has also gone through, you are just quoting the Food Act of 2023. So I've seen some other articles that are saying, despite the Food Act, but Nigeria is going through this kind of experience, to experience the acute food and nutritional insecurity. That's unfortunate. But I mean, as I said, we need to look at it from short-term to long-term kind of perspectives. So short-term is basically, we need to go to the drawing board now, basically asking ourselves in terms of, what do we do? So the government has the responsibility as the chief duty bearer to bring together the different stakeholders, to bang heads together and mobilize resources, because the immediate one is come June to August. How do we go about feeding our people? So that's a key one that the government should be looking into. When you think about the Act, and the Act of 2023, which basically looks at food security as an act, there are two issues there. One is basically whether the government accepts that being an act, they do have the responsibility to ensure that its citizens are actually fed and do not experience this acute food and the nutrition insecurity that we're talking about now. But at the same time, as I've always been saying, the citizens too have the responsibility. So one thing is whether the citizens do know that having this kind of act, it gives them a kind of entitlement to demand from the duty bearer what needs to be provided to them. So those are things. So whether citizens are aware, I'm not sure. Whether the government is accepting that they are the chief duty bearer and therefore required to be able to ensure that its citizens are not experiencing this is something else. So when you look at, I talked about humanitarian response is required immediately, particularly when you think about the lean periods, June to August. So the government has the responsibility and actually has the mandate, can easily go out and call upon all the different stakeholders, which is also coming out in the report to say, I think this is something that requires all stakeholders to get together to be able to find a way in terms of how to address the situation. So mobilizing resources, bring food into the country, whether, I'm not sure whether food is already available in the country or it has to be brought in, that's something else that needs to be looked into. But long term, we should also be looking at what do we need to do to be able to enhance our food production. So whether we're talking about the smallholder food producers or whether we're looking at the commercial food producers at higher level, estate producers, for example, to be able to ensure that we do have this food in country. Now, we could be looking at other strategies like storage of food, because sometimes there is a lot of waste on food once you harvest it. Estimates have it that almost 25% of the produced food doesn't get to be consumed because it's spoiled in the process. So those are things that needs to be looked into. And grain storage is one of those issues that needs to be looked into, because if there is a problem like this one, you just grow to the strategic grain reserve and draw down on it and be able to provide to the citizens. So these are things that needs to be looked into. But the whole issue in terms of production, whether at small scale level, our farmers are able to produce adequately, these are things that needs to be looked into. And there are so many, I think, strategies that could be put in place to ensure enhanced or increased production of food at country level.
We'll come back to these strategies. But for now, Mr. Dangana, you are wearing two caps. You are a lawyer, you are a farmer. I want you to put on the farmer's cap first.
Yes, sir.
And let's look at the drivers of this unfortunate development. That 30.6 million Nigerians at risk of hunger during the lean season. From about 680,000 between last month and May is going to rise to
30 million.
To 30.6 million, as the case may be. What do you think are the drivers? I mean, given your experience as a farmer and a Nigerian who has lived through the times.
You see, the issue basically, it's not as if people don't farm, and it's not as if there is no food grown in Nigeria. People are into farming, some of us farm, but the challenges that the farmers are facing largely are things that has to do with government intervention. It's out of the control of the ordinary farmer, you and I. For instance, there are arable lands to farm. And before farming, we only rely on the rainy season rains to cultivate. Where are the irrigation schemes that will complement or augment the rainy season farming? With proper irrigation channel, rice, maize, and other grains could be harvested or cultivated 3 times in a year. And that will augment. Now, even with the rainy season farming that people so much depend on 100%, how many people go to farm, save, and return? Issue of security challenges, issue of farmer headers clashes, among others. In the Northeast, for instance, the Chad Basin is one of the arable land for irrigation scheme using the Chad Basin Authority and the Lake Chad Basin there. But now, nothing is being done there as a result of what? Insecurity. Whose responsibility is it to provide security? Is it that of the government? Has the government not failed in doing that? So the little food that is available, the peasant farmers, aside farming, also have other needs, like paying their children's school fees and meeting other daily demands. As at the time that these harvests were made, they will be forced, in order to meet up other demands, to sell these items at a giveaway price. And who purchase them? It is the middlemen, those that are into poultry feed and things like that. And at the end of the day, the farmer has nothing to fall back to. So the social security system on the part of the government, it's inadequate for the food production to strive in Nigeria. Farmer headers clash, there was a policy with respect to ranching of animals or cattle and things like that to reduce this. Who have heard anything about that again? Has it been implemented? We are good in formulating policies, but the impact of these policies, the beneficiaries of it never get to see the implementation. And at the end of the day, it is the common man that will suffer. Now, like this, I find it difficult to believe when it comes to issue of shortage of food, because people farm, if we are to borrow leaf, for instance, from two countries, Libya, before the death of Muammar Gaddafi, Libya was a desert, but he turned it to orchards, and they produce a lot. Saudi Arabia, for instance, I'm aware that 3 times a year, they clear their storage facility and sell the food, not because they expired, but because they have new stock to take, and the store cannot accommodate. So they sell those things at a giveaway price to the commoners. In Nigeria, our national silos, what happened to them? At a point in time, I read that the national silos are being privatized. For a government that is serious about the food and welfare of its citizens, will not even think of that, not to implement it. So the problem largely has to do from the government, the policies that are to drive food production, inconsistency or political opposition to policies that has to do with this. At a point we had NISAL, at a point we had anchored borrowers and things like that. What is the relevance of this today? Even as at that time, who were the beneficiaries? Are we sure they are not just the executive portfolio holders or the portfolio farmers that hijacked this and it never got to? So now that all of us will have our fingers burnt, if these people are hungry, we should be ready that they will come to us wherever we are. They will come knocking, and it will sound inhuman for you to turn your face on the people or the person that is in need. So it's a collective effort, both on the part of the government and the governed, for us to see how we take care of these challenges that is imminent. The Food Rights Act is one thing that people may think that with that Right to Food Act, we may have food everywhere. That is far from reality. There is no free food anywhere, not even in Freetown. So rather, it is an act that is encouraging the government or giving us assurance that the government will direct its principles towards ensuring the availability of food, distribution, sustainability, among others.
I'll come back to the Right to Food or Food Rights Act 2023. That's when I will need you to put on your legal cap to look more in-depth at it. But Mr. McKenna, let me come back to this whole issue of poor nutrition, food insecurity. That report that we're looking at now speaks of Nigeria facing the highest, Nigeria having the highest number of food insecure people globally. Mm-hmm. Not in Africa, globally. Mm-hmm. For a country as big as this, mm-hmm. with human and material resources in surplus, so to say, very arable land, with waters and seas that mm-hmm. can produce whatever they can eat. How did we, as a country, get to that point where we have the highest number of food insecure people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it's all dwelling down to the whole issues in terms of how did we get it wrong. He touched on a very important point, which I would want to agree to the barrister. When you compare Nigeria to other countries, I mean, I had an opportunity of visiting Egypt, where they would go 3-4 years without rainfall, but they wouldn't complain about food insecurity because they do a lot of irrigation using the Nile River. But there is a lot of support which is coming in from the duty bearer, from the government, because the smallholder farmers would still need to find a mechanism in terms of how to access that water from River Nile. So they have got a scheme where small-scale generators are being made available to the smallholder farmers so that they could actually fix them, access the water from River Nile, and be able to do whatever kind of agriculture they want to do, whether they want to go into livestock, whether they want to go fish farming, they want to go into grain production. So they would not have any problems in terms of food security or nutrition insecurity that we're talking about here. So I would want to kind of think that's an area that a lot of countries are not investing into. So irrigation investment is very, very important, basically for us to be able to meet some of the challenges that we're talking about here. There are other things that needs to be looked into as well. For example, input. Sometimes, smallholder farmers complain about the type of seed they are able to access. Are we able to provide or make accessible type of seed that will help in terms of production and enhanced production that we're looking at? So these are some of the things that needs to be looked into. Perhaps it's important that when you're talking about issues of food insecurity or nutritional insecurity, it's not just looking at grain or lack of grain in the country, but we need to, when we're talking about food security, we could talk about access and production. So it could be that one would be food security, because we are lucky that he's combining being in law as well as being a farmer. But you and me, perhaps we don't even have the farm. But we are not food insecure. We are right, because we have got the capability of going to the market to be able to buy. So we need to be looking at all those factors in terms of our people being able to get excess cash to be able to go and buy whatever they want, whether they want to buy fish, they want to buy meat, whatever. That element has to be provided, has to be looked into, and it helps basically to be able to meet these issues that we're talking about.
But let me extend that to the most recent in terms of the cutting of aid funding to most countries of the world as a result of the policies of the Trump administration. How is that likely to impact the situation we are looking at now during the lean season between June and August?
Honestly, it's going to make the situation worse, because I talked about humanitarian support. USAID funding has been providing a lot of humanitarian support to many countries, including Nigeria. So when you think about meeting the needs of those that are food insecure, it will be not an easy task. But this is where other governments have already looked at it and have already started looking at how do we relocate our little resources that we have to ensure that our people do not suffer. Because most people that suffer are people in the rural areas, and we need to think about what mechanism are we putting in place for them to be able to access this. So in other places, they would actually draw down from the strategic grain reserve that we've talked about to make food available in the market. Because there are other people that might not have food in the house, but if they've got food available in a selling point, they would be able to go and buy the little they would manage. So, or other organizations, basically like WFP, going out, providing food to identified households that do not have any support. So it's going to make the situation even worse, honestly.
Mr. Dangana, let's look at the situation that we have had over a couple of months now. The high food inflation across the country. You are a farmer. There are people, the Nigerians, who cannot access food, even though by the provisions of the Food Rights Act, government has the responsibility to ensure that Nigerians get sufficient and nutritious food on their tables. Now, apart from the drivers that you have talked about, header farmers clashes, insurgency, and what have you, there's also the situation, the economic policies of government. How much has that impacted on food production in Nigeria, say in the last 2, 3, or 4 years?
This exactly is one of my points of divergence here. He made mention of the fact that though I am a farmer, but you and himself are capable of going to the market to buy food and afford it and things like that. I pray we never see the time that with your food, you may not even have the food to purchase. And
with your money.
This is yes, with your money. You
Yes.
can't get food to buy. I made mention of some of the policies of the government, and if we are to recap, because as students of history, certain deliberate effort, intentional effort were made in the past, whether or not for the problem of implementation, assessment, and monitoring and things like that, they never see the light of the day. We have Operation Feed the Nation, we have Green Revolution, we have, these are intentional policies aiming towards food sustenance in the past. Recently, I made mention of the NISA, the anchored borrowers and things like that. But let me say, if I'm to wear my cap as somebody that is into small farming, I never saw any facility to fall back on, either under NISA or anchor borrowers and things like that. In the whole of an area where we carried out this, I can beat my chest to say there are no beneficiaries of it. So the question is, despite these policies, who are the beneficiaries? Those that implemented this project, if today they are asked to produce the beneficiaries of this project, and why did the project fail? Who are those that collected the facilities and never paid back? Because those that matters told them that government money are not to be paid back. You collect the money and never implemented it towards the project that it was meant for, thereby depriving the willing people that ordinarily would have accessed and used this, the access to the facility. So now, with respect to the Food Act now, it's one of the intentional, though non-justiciable, it's an intervention. The constitutional amendment, chapter 2 of the Constitution, specifically section 16, subsection 2, that was amended to bring in issue of right to food. And that section provides the generality of that chapter is the fundamental objective and directive of the state principles or policies. It shall be the policies of the Nigerian government to ensure adequate, enrich, and availability of food. But the fact that this is provided, does it give you and I the right to enforce it against the government? Ordinarily, no. And if that is what it's meant, therefore, why do we need the provision of a right that we cannot implement?
That is not enforceable.
It's not enforceable.
Yes.
So, in
Because
respect to
under
this,
chapter 2 of the
you
Constitution.
look at chapter 4 of the Constitution, even those constitutionally guaranteed rights are not absolute in their own, in the strict sense of it. There is limit. There are limitations. There are instances that though it is your constitutionally guaranteed right, it can be deprived. So this chapter 2 now, as farmers and people that are concerned in Nigeria, the essence is move this chapter if government is really deliberate and intentional about giving rights to food, even when the right is not to provide free food for the citizens, move it from chapter 2 to chapter 4 and see whether there will be no action and things like that against the government in it. As it is, I will encourage Nigerians, farmers and non-farmers alike, to borrow leaf from India, from South Africa. Situation like this exists in the past. In South Africa, in India, for instance, in the case of Kishin Patnayaka and others versus the state of Odisha, so also in the case of Francis Canali versus Union of Territory, Delhi, their provisions were actually in chapter 2 of the Constitution, of the Indian Constitution, which is non-justiciable. But the court, through judicial activism, gave an interpretation of this, that you cannot give me right to life under chapter 4. What are the components of life? If I must be alive, what do I need? Don't I need food to survive? Not only food, quality food, nutritious food, and things like that. So it is the duty of the government to do that. This is what we call judicial activism. And not just to close eyes on anything that has to do with chapter 2 to say that it is a non-justiciable right. It is a mere policy and directive of the state principle to do that. I'm calling on all that concern in this segment to see that we move either to move it from chapter 2 to chapter 4 as it is in South Africa, or for the court to give interpretation that yes, though it is a non-justiciable right, but it is a vital component of right to life which is enshrined or provided for in chapter 4 of the Constitution.
So as it is today, with the provision of section 16 under chapter 2 of the Constitution, which you say is not justiciable, and we do know that, but what are the responsibilities that government has in ensuring that the provisions of this section are implemented?
It's for government to come up with policies and ensure the safety guards for farmers. For instance, farmers going to farm, how secured are their lives on the field when working? People working, particularly within the North Central region up to the southeast, the farmer headers that is alleged to be one of the major factors. You take, for instance, from June or July, you plant beans, and at most, by the last week of August, you nurtured it, it blossomed with flowers, it brings out the bean pods. At the point of harvest, just a night, a herder could move his herds of cattle and finish it overnight. You can see the time that you have put into this. As a result of this, within Abuja that I know and part of Nasarawa State, a lot of people did not cultivate beans in the last farming season because of incidents like this. You could be at home and your produce in the farm would just be
I can attest to that because I have so many stories of that nature.
Yeah. And these are people that believe that they are United Nations citizens. United Nations in the sense that nobody touches them, that they are international citizens and things like that. By the time they got arrested, they will just offer one minimal amount of money, which is very annoying as compensation. I didn't farm to be compensated with money. I may farm this thing just to put it in my store to ensure that I know the source of what I'm eating, and not to go to the market and buy the one that is overburdened with preservatives and insecticides. So with this, let's see the deliberate policies of the government. And these are policies that should not just end in the paper or stop at the paper. One, if you are providing loan facilities or agricultural inputs to farmers, how do you identify the real farmers that are into farming and not portfolio farmers? If we are to go through irrigation scheme today, there are lands, but where is the farm? Or where is the source of water that could take care of this? In terms of storage, you made mention of the fact that more than 30% of post-harvest crops got spoiled in the course of transportation or storage and things like that. This has to do with season of planting. For instance, after the first rain, a lot of people will go to farm and plant maize. This maize, depending on the maturity period, some could take up to 3 months, some will take 2 months, some will take 60 days. Yeah. So by the time it gets dried, and that would be the commencement of the heavy rainfalls, if you harvest at that point, where do you take them to for storage? Definitely it will spoil. So on the part of the agri-extension farmers who are near non-existing now, the government will have to bring back this, go to the rural areas to educate the farmers. The planting season, the time of planting is very important. And have some sort of facilities for processing or drying of farm produce. Because even after harvest, by the time you spread them on the field in the farm to dry, you could still have incidents of headers coming to feed and or being stolen, or rodents contacting it, and the incidents of Lassa fever and things like that are still very prevalent in the country. So the policies that will be brought will ensure the production of the food first. to ensure that they are preserved through adequate and proper storage facilities, and also to provide for a market whenever they are needed. The government must be willing. Like in the capital market, we have market makers where there are sufficient surplus of shares, they could buy it. At the point of deficit, they bring them out. Let government have something like this in the field of agriculture, and to ensure that the farmers will not be ripped off. For instance, during the last farming season, people were ripped off because you cultivate land, you weed, you buy chemicals for weed control, of the insecticide control and things like that, after harvest, transportation and things like that. All of a sudden, there was a policy or a directive that the borders, which were initially closed, have been open for people to float the Nigerian market with foreign produce, agri-produce, similar to the ones that have been produced in Nigeria. How helpful is that to the local farmers who have possibly taken loan to farm and are expecting to sell these things and pay back? At the point of harvest, the price were relatively okay, but none of this product, if you go to market now, that they produce, the prices of this produce in the market today is anything near when it was harvested. Why? Because of the policies of the government to open the gate, the borders. And the borders that were open, it's not for people that brings market produce directly to the market for people to sell. No, there are people that supply the industrialists, poultry feed makers, fish feed makers, among others. So they could not come and buy directly from the farmers again. Rather, they have imported produce, stock in their warehouses, and whatever happens to the one that is farmed here, that is your problem. So policies like this geared towards, one, demoralizing the farmers, two, putting the farmers in an extreme hardship where you collect money to farm in anticipation that after harvest you will sell this thing. Now if you sell, they are near nothing. They are equivalent to nothing.
Almost valueless.
Yeah.
And in exchange, I mean, and a part of that is the fact that we do a lot of injury to our foreign exchange processes in Nigeria in getting imported food items. All right. So, CD, let's look at these policies and whether or not we can borrow a leaf. Are there countries that we can borrow a leaf from where such policies have been enacted and followed up, and the processes are such that benefited those countries that, in fact, we can look up to and say, this is one or two or three countries that we can borrow a leaf from?
So I guess two areas that Barrister has talked about. I think I was quite interested in the whole issue on the Food Act, and that, if I understood it well, that it is sitting in the wrong chapter.
Yes.
Yeah, currently, in our case. I guess, so you already mentioned two countries where change was done. So perhaps as a lesson, we should be looking at how did they go about doing that change? Who initiated that? Is it from the government side? Is it from the citizens and other players basically getting organized together and bring out their voice so that we see this change happening? Because without that change, if I understood it well, it's not something that we can hold the government to account for, because it is sitting in the wrong place. So that's one. But in terms of learning from others, I think we already mentioned some other countries in terms of other areas, issues to do with, for example, irrigation farming and irrigation schemes and all that. I was also interested in the whole issue on extension agents, because that's what I noticed as well, having traveled to a number of states in the country, because without the extension agencies, who are basically government personnel, the uptake of whatever technologies which is going to the smallholder farmers would be low, because they are there basically to kind of advise farmers on how they should go about, for example, in taking care of particular types of products this is how we should grow groundnuts if you're growing groundnuts. This is the way we do when it comes to dealing with rice growing, for example. So it is very important that we have these extension agencies in place. And this is something that needs as well probably be linked to the whole issue about Food Act, because these are just things that would be able to facilitate the production of different types of foods that we're looking at within Nigeria. So I think those are some of the things that I thought I could talk about briefly.
Let's look at the problem at hand now.
Yes.
We are in April.
Yes.
The first 3 months of the lean season has set in, March to May, and then we're looking at June to August. What can be done to avert these very concerning reports that have been put out here now? What are the immediate steps that can be taken to ameliorate this situation?
The immediate one is basically where the government is able to mobilize different stakeholders, come to the drawing table to come up with a plan. I mean, the plan that I see here is basically the humanitarian response plan. This is the immediate one. And this is all doable. I mean, Nigeria and many other countries, they do have what we call the humanitarian country team. So the government needs to link up with the humanitarian country team to come to the drawing board in terms of drawing plans for humanitarian response. Because what we need here is basically that. So we should be looking at where do we get this food? Is it already available in the country, as I said earlier? If it's available in the country, this is where we should be offering good price to the smallholder producers so that they see the benefits of growing their own food because they know the market is readily available in country. If it's not available in country, we should be looking at ways in terms of how do we bring it into the country because people require food. And what kind of food? That will be determined by the people in the different areas because Nigeria is also blessed because when you think about the types of food, it's a variety. In other countries, they would just be looking at one type of grain. Or they could just be talking, for example, rice only, or could be talking about only yams. But Nigeria has all these. I think this is already an advantage that we should be looking at, and it's a question of how do we go about that. In other places, as the government is required, it could be facilitating basically relocation of the food from different corners of the country to go to certain corners that do not have. And these are things that should be looked into. And as I said, it will also enhance production for the subsequent years because farmers would see that, well, I did produce this particular crop last year and I got a good market within the country. So we should be looking at also ways in terms of how do we go into sustainability of the same because that's very important.
Another very important aspect has to do with from that report, has to do with the fate of over 5 million children and women who will, the report captions here, who are at heightened the risk during this period because of the nutritional value that is required for them to survive.
Yes. So that's where, I mean, when you're doing food distribution, you look at the mechanism in terms of who do we target. Now, the report is very clear in terms of who should be targeted. So if you're talking about lactating or pregnant women, so those are ones that should be targeted immediately. You could be thinking about young people, children. So where do we get these children from? Are we targeting them at village level? Are we targeting them at the school level and all that? But there are so many programs that could be put in place. I mean, there are even school feeding programs that could be looked into and looking at the particular needs. For example, if the challenge here, which is food and nutrition insecurity. So we should be looking at the type of food that should be provided. For example, if it gets to the school feeding program. But all those are interventions that could be looked into to be able to kind of tackle the problem as it is now. So immediate and then long-term strategies have to be put in place.
Yes.
Yes, I was I was going to add something that
Yes.
the statistics that was displayed
Yeah.
is a result of researched work.
Yes.
I believe
Yes.
it doesn't just get cropped up. I will solicit that, as a matter of seriousness, for a government that is concerned about its citizenry, is to identify the source of that statistics,
Yeah.
those that conducted research into it, the location in which that was conducted, thereby identifying the primary beneficiaries of it. And in supplying the needs of this beneficiary, utmost good faith and sincerity, not the principle of trimming by such that from the federal government, if anything is given, by the time it gets to the state government, not exactly what was given gets there. By the time it gets to the final beneficiary, you are just left with one lean thing. So to checkmate and monitor that exactly the beneficiaries that were identified benefited from it, and what was actually budgeted for their benefit gets to them and doesn't get diverted and trimmed alongside any other. And also part of the policy and the sincerity, we had in the past the issue of farm settlements. Farm settlements, I am a graduate of agriculture, for instance, or I'm a graduate of sociology, but I want to go into farming. I have gotten a land about 10,000 hectares, and all I need is the support of the government. Can government provide me with, say, 5 tractors, facility into the farm, farmhouse, storage facilities, water source, and things like that? Myself and my workers could relocate into that. That becomes our settlement to ensure that we have maximum productivity from the land that I have. So issues like this should be encouraged.
Yeah.
And when they are given, it should not be with the aim that within the next 4 or 5 years, you will have to work, kill yourself to pay back. In situations like this, it puts people under pressure, and at the end of the day, they don't meet up, they develop hypertension, they do all sorts of things and die. The government should also be human when granting these facilities to willing and people who are ready to do, and not just turn it into political avenue to say, these are the supporters of Party A, these are the supporters of Party B in giving this facility. The sincerity of purpose with which it's to be identified and implemented also matters. And by so doing, it will take care of the long-term plan for it. But for the immediate problem that we have, until the research source is identified, bring out money or bring in produce from wherever they are to address this. Otherwise, Nigeria, the giant of Africa, will become a laughingstock within the International Committee of Friends.
All right. The CD talked earlier on about long-term planning.
Yes, sir.
For you, what would be the pillars of that long-term planning? For instance, are we looking at, say, maybe mechanizing our farming processes? Because at the moment, it's just small-scale, subsistence farming that appears to be sustaining the agricultural sector in Nigeria.
Yes, sir. There are so many ways that we are to look at it. You see, people just do things, projects, without conducting the impact assessment of it. Let's take, for instance, NYC scheme today. There's no local government you will go that there are no NYC, there are no core members there. There is no local government in this country today that you will go that you may not get up to 5,000 to 10,000, 5,000 hectares of land for farming. For crying loud, what is wrong in government introducing its own farm? The NYC core members can be taking care of this. We have faculties of agriculture, Department of Agriculture in colleges of education, colleges of agri, universities of agriculture, and what have you. Other than the theory that they have been taught in the classroom, what other practical scheme do they have? You will find a situation whereby a graduate of agriculture possibly had never seen a tractor throughout the course of his training. So where do you handle the mechanized aspect of it? You travel from here to Lafia or to Akwanga, the settlement you see along the roads are very minimal, nucleated. The rest are land. Are these not arable lands? If you leave Gwagwalada to go to Lokoja, the same thing. If you are going to Kaduna to Kano, there is no part of this country that we cannot get land to farm. So let government be intentional about this. Come up with policies that will drive this. As students from colleges of education, these are your targets. Students from federal colleges of agriculture, these are your targets. Federal University of Agriculture, these are your targets. From the various universities that have faculties and department of agriculture, there are lands within the location that these universities and schools are situated. I was very happy some few months ago, I think it's either in Ondo or Oshun, I saw a program, this NYC core members half-hour project. For that moment, they centered on the NYC scheme, farm scheme for the units. They planted cassava, ugu, some vegetables and things like that. Not minding that those that plant this for this season may not live to harvest it. However, they made it a continuous scheme. As small as that is, if it is borrowed and implemented at other large scale or in a wide scale across the country, it has its way of bridging the gap in terms of food availability and sustainability.
Just to add on the same,
Yes.
In some countries, they would also go into contractual farming with those people that already have land. So you go into an agreement in terms of how much you'd expect to produce from a piece of land and how much would go to the government, to the grain, to the National Grain Reserve, which is basically a product for the government. So that's something that needs to be looked into as well. Yep.
All right. I wanted you to comment on the whole issue of intentional investment in comprehensive nutritional services. I don't know if you can do that in a minute.
In nutrition?
Yes, intentional investment in nutrition, in nutritional services across board. Because here we're talking about nutrition for children and for pregnant women, for lactating women, and what have you. Yes.
So I guess for me, my only comment would be that's an agreement that needs to, the government can go into with those that are specifically manufacturing, for example, food for children that are intended to improve children's nutrition. And some of these could be used, as I said earlier, on programs that could be made available, say school feeding programs or early school curriculum, early school, I don't know whether
education platform.
Education platforms. So before they go to the primary schools, they'll be in the village. This is at village level, where they could be brought together and take them through the education system, and you provide them with the nutritious food so that they are not affected nutritionally.
Healthy living and healthy development for the child.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. Mr. John McKenna is the country director, Oxfam in Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time. And Mr. Yahya Dan Asabe Dangana, a senior advocate of Nigeria, a lawyer who is also a farmer. Thank you so much for your time and for bringing your expertise in both law and your experiences in the farming sector to bear on this discussion. Thank you so much for your time. And to your viewers out there, we hope that you have learned one or two things from this discussion. Nigeria is at a precarious stage at this point in time. Between June and August, that is what they regard as the lean season, and it's estimated that 30.6 million people will be in severe food need. We hope that government will do something to mitigate this before it does happen. For now, thank you for your time, and we'll see you again when we bring you a fresh edition of the program. Bye for now.